By the mid-1960s, the Japanese film industry was in the grip of kaiju mania. Toho's Godzilla films dominated the box office, and rival studios were eager to tap into the genre's popularity. Daiei Film, a studio known for prestigious titles like Rashomon and Gate of Hell, found itself needing a hit. After the international success of King Kong vs. Godzilla in 1962, Daiei made a push to create its own monster movie. Their first attempt was 1964's giant horde beast Nezura, centered on an invasion of oversized rats. But real rats brought real problems. The production was shut down after the animals spread lice and ticks on set. The sudden cancellation left Daiei scrambling for a replacement project. Studio head Masaichi Nagata demanded a new idea, something that could compete with Godzilla. This became Attack on Tokyo by a Fire-Breathing Turtle, later expanded into a full treatment titled A Lowly Tortoise Flies Through the Sky. That was the title of the screenplay, I promise. Takahashi's story followed a nuclear explosion that awakens a massive turtle buried in Arctic ice. Within Daiei, few believed in the film. The crew worked under financial strain, relying on outdated equipment and limited resources. Gamera's suit was built by Masao Yagi and his father, both former Toho employees. The special effects were a mix of suitmation, miniature sets, and rough prop work. Gamera's iconic flight was pulled off with a mechanical model that reportedly caught fire during filming. With the title finalized as Gamera the Giant Monster, it premiered on November 27, 1965, and expectations were very low, but Gamera found an audience. The film was a surprise box office success, proving there was still room in the market for another giant monster, especially one with tusks and jet propulsion. The underdog project had landed, and Daiei now had its own kaiju to rival Godzilla. After an American jet downs an unidentified aircraft in the Arctic, a nuclear explosion awakens Gamera, a massive prehistoric turtle. Drawn to heat and radiation, Gamera leaves a trail of destruction across Japan, resisting military attacks and revealing the ability to fly. A young boy named Toshio believes that Gamera is kind and misunderstood. As devastation mounts, scientists initiate the Z-Plan to remove Gamera from Earth. Lured to Oshima Island by fire and an erupting volcano, Gamera is sealed inside a rocket and launched into space. The world celebrates while Toshio quietly says goodbye. At first glance, Gamera the Giant Monster looks like a straight-up knockoff of the original 1954 Godzilla film. It's black and white, opens with a prehistoric creature awakened by an atomic bomb, and follows the familiar arc of destruction, panic, and military scrambling, but even compared to early Toho efforts, this feels cheaper. That reputation isn't helped by how the entire Showa-era Gamera series got branded as low-rent Godzilla clones, especially once Mystery Science Theater 3000 got their hands on them. But if you can get past the obvious comparisons and budget limitations, there's actually a lot to appreciate here. First off, Gamera himself is a pretty compelling presence. While he clearly shares DNA with Godzilla, he's a weirder, more chaotic creature. One of my favorite moments in the film is when the military flips Gamera on his back and they think they've won, until he suddenly starts spinning like a top and rockets off into the sky. It's so abrupt and strange, but it works, turning what could have been a typical monster defeat into a defining moment for Gamera's character. He's unpredictable in a way that feels oddly fresh. Even more interesting is how the movie immediately plants the idea that Gamera might not be a typical mindless destroyer. In the early scenes, he saves a young boy named Toshio from falling to his death, which introduces the idea that he's not necessarily evil, just dangerous and misunderstood. This idea becomes a defining trait in later films, where he becomes the guardian of all children, or friend of all children, depending on your understanding. It's clunky here, but you can see the seeds being planted. That said, the film has one huge problem. The human characters are dull across the board. The scientists and military officials do what they're supposed to do. Look concerned, bark orders, explain the stakes, but they're forgettable. And then there's Toshio. Who is the film's attempt at an emotional core, but it doesn't work whatsoever. He's supposed to be the one character who sees Gamera's potential for good, but the movie gives him almost nothing to support that claim. Gamera saves him one time, and that's enough for Toshio to spend the rest of the movie insisting Gamera is actually a kind soul who doesn't want to hurt anyone. Meanwhile, we then watch Gamera destroy entire city blocks and almost kill dozens of people, God knows how many. There's a scene where Toshio sneaks off during an attack to get closer to Gamera, nearly getting an innocent worker killed in the process. Later, when the survivors mock him, the movie tries to make us feel bad for Toshio, but honestly, I was on their side the whole time.
Gamera's my friend, he's good.
Yeah, I know. Here, put this on. Go on.
Like, this kid's an asshole.
Go on. Whoa, kid. I'll say goodbye to Gamera for you.
I mean, the idea of a kid empathizing with a monster could totally work. Gamera the Brave nails this dynamic with more care and patience, but here, Toshio just comes off as an obnoxious, oblivious kid who can't read the room. Or the growing body count. If Gamera had a few more clear-cut moments of compassion, Toshio's faith might seem a bit more reasonable. Instead, it just feels like the movie is bending over backwards to justify his poor behavior with barely anything to stand on. Oddly enough, though, some of the most effective human moments come from completely unrelated characters. There's a great little scene at a go-go bar where a bunch of new characters who are never seen before and never seen again after are partying as Gamera approaches. The police show up and tell them to evacuate, but they just kind of shrug it off and keep dancing. These kinds of throwaway vignettes actually add a lot, and I love when giant monster movies include these. They give the city a sense of life beyond the core cast, and help sell the idea that this is a world full of people trying to go about their lives as a giant turtle rains hell from above. It's a small thing, but it makes the destruction feel just so much more grounded. And speaking of destruction, the action sequences are genuinely fun to watch, especially with the black and white cinematography giving everything a slightly grittier and more grounded texture. I've always thought that kaiju suits and miniatures just look better without color. There's something about the lack of polish that makes it easier to buy into the illusion, but while the tone and contrast help, the actual image quality doesn't. The cinematography here is muddy, with poor exposure that swallows detail in the shadows. Even modern restorations like Arrow Video Blu-ray can't fully rescue it. The effects work is solid for the budget, but it's often hard to see what's happening. And the budget is rough. Even the cheapest Toho Godzilla films never quite looked this strapped for cash. Sets are sparse, miniatures are wobbly, and the monster's suit looks bulky and awkward. But there's something charming about how hard the filmmakers are trying here. It's a scrappy patchwork production that's constantly punching above its weight, and every once in a while, it lands a hit. What really caught me off guard with Gamera the Giant Monster is how direct it is with its political themes. Most films from this era try to say something, but it tends to lean on metaphors or vague gestures, and a lot of it just comes off as being preachy or self-important. But this film doesn't do that. It's blunt in a way that feels pointed and angry, almost spiteful. Gamera doesn't rise up from the ocean because of an abstract moral failing or some accidental scientific experiment. He's awakened because an American military plane carrying a nuclear bomb crashes in the Arctic. There's never any ambiguity there. The blame is placed squarely on foreign intervention. The film immediately lays out a cause and effect chain. The US detonates a bomb in contested airspace, Gamera emerges, and Japan pays the price. It's hard not to think about Hiroshima and Nagasaki in that instance. The history lingers in the background, even if the film never mentions it directly. Gamera's rampage through Japanese cities brings with it that familiar imagery of fire and destruction, of civilians running through the streets, of entire neighborhoods reduced to rubble. And it's never really framed as an accident or as a tragedy of nature. The film is saying that Japan is once again suffering because of decisions made by powerful nations that see it as a playing field rather than a country. This is one of the more compelling elements of the film, and it's what makes the English dub just so frustrating to watch. Quick side note, by the way, people have commented about this. On all my retrospectives, I watched the Japanese version first, then the American dub, just as a clarification. The dub doesn't really do its job of just translating the dialogue. It tries to localize the movie and rewrite the movie's meaning. One of the added lines has a character thanking the United Nations and other countries besides Japan for helping to defeat Gamera, which is kind of true in the Japanese version, but it's a bit bizarre how emphasized it is, and it feels completely at odds with everything that the film was setting up.
The Mars rocket of the Z-Plan, constructed with the combined efforts of the world's superpowers, was successfully launched just now with Gamera imprisoned inside.
The original version spends its entire runtime showing how Japan is left alone to deal with the disaster created by someone else, and the dub reframes that more as a group project where the international community steps in as the savior, and to me that comes off as being just a little dishonest. It feels like the American distributors saw the original cut and basically thought, okay, we can't have Americans be the bad guy, let's let's get rid of that part. And the result is this very weird disconnect where the tone of the film is angry and accusatory, but the dubbed version tries to smooth things over and injects some optimism that was never really there to begin with. This is what gives the original Japanese version its edge. It doesn't offer a clean resolution or a hopeful message. Gamera doesn't die or repent or transform into a misunderstood hero, at least in this film. He gets tricked into a rocket and shot into space. That's it. There's no justice, there's no redemption, just a containment strategy to lock the problem up and launch it out of sight. It feels more like a gesture of desperation than a real victory. The film ends without resolution, and that lack of closure really says something, for better or for worse. Gamera is gone, but the damage remains. Japan is still dealing with the aftermath of something it didn't cause. And while the film does try to have kind of a happy ending in the American version, you still get the sense that, yeah, like, tons of lives were lost. The countries responsible get to just move on. And the ending, in my opinion, is kind of disappointing for entirely different reasons as an audience member. You wonder how the military is going to defeat Gamera throughout the whole film, and they just put him in an egg-shaped rocket and send him to space. It's unique, but it just falls flat for me, and it doesn't work with the rest of the film. Something I want to talk about is the English dub, specifically just how available they are to everyone. I mean, you can go right now on YouTube and watch this movie and pretty much every Gamera movie in the entire franchise for free on YouTube. Like, it was just uploaded by some random guy. And to this day, most of the English dubs are the most accessible versions floating around on YouTube, and even some weird, like, public domain collections, which I don't even want to get into that. That's all legal stuff that, frankly, I don't care about. But it's often in less than ideal quality. And sure, on one hand, it's great because it allows for people to just watch these movies completely for free. It's super accessible. That's something that I've always celebrated. That's why my movies are made for free on YouTube for anyone to watch. But with Gamera, it means that you are watching the worst possible version of the movie. One of the dubs that I watched for this very retrospective is a perfect example. It feels like it was thrown together without much care or coordination. The voice actors speak with this awkward, rushed cadence, as if they're reading straight off the page for the very first time without ever hearing the original performances.
Hello, how do you do, sir? We are from the exploration ship Chidori Maru.
I know.
It's full of these weird pauses, unnatural stutters, and flat line deliveries that don't match what's happening on screen.
Captain, the ice is getting thicker. Shall we keep going?
Of course, we must get through.
The dialogue really doesn't feel lived in or considered, it's just filler. Worse than that, some of the voices sound like caricatures. Instead of trying to match the tone of the Japanese version, they go for these over-the-top cartoonish inflections that make it impossible to take any scene seriously.
Thank you.
Bye.
It reminded me of the old Speed Racer cartoon, where every line has this breathless urgency.
And from now on, there'll be enough money for the doctors to make you well again.
Whether someone was talking about a monster or just having a conversation on an airplane about an uninteresting topic.
Yes. It was a lottery with human lives.
You can tell the dub was made quickly and cheaply, but it's more than just a production issue. It ultimately changes how the movie feels. You lose the weight of what's happening. Gamera becomes more of a sideshow, and the film's quieter, more serious moments come off as awkward or unintentionally funny. It becomes harder to connect with the characters when their voices are constantly breaking immersion. Even someone like Toshio, who already feels misguided in the original, ends up sounding completely ridiculous in the dub. You stop seeing him as a misguided child and start seeing him as a joke.
Come here.
Leave me alone! No! I don't want to go! Let go! Let go!
Come back here.
I don't want to get off!
Thankfully, this isn't the only version of the film. Alongside the standard English dub, you can also find a completely re-edited American version called Gamera the Invincible, with 2 M's in Gamera. Like what happened to Godzilla, when it was re-released in the US in 1956 with Raymond Burr in Godzilla, King of the Monsters. It takes what was originally a Japanese story about foreign-caused destruction and reframes it through the lens of Cold War propaganda. It's hard not to feel like the film is being pulled in two directions here. One is the original version, more raw and national in its anger, and the other is a sanitized retelling, where America is suddenly responsible for saving the day, with the United Nations and the international community playing only a very minuscule role. Watching both versions back to back like I did is like listening to someone tell a story, only to have someone else immediately jump in to correct them and say, well actually this happened. It's easy to brush off these dubs and re-edits as historical curiosities or relics of their time, but they do matter. They shape how entire generations viewed these films in certain parts of the world. For a very, very long time, people didn't really see Gamera the Giant Monster. They saw whatever American distributors wanted it to be. And while part of the charm of these old monster movies is tied up in their low-budget translations and goofy voice work, I think it's important to acknowledge how much they warped the original intent. It's one thing to have a silly dub, it's another to have an entirely different movie posing as the original. That's why I'm telling you right now, please, for the love of God, go watch the Japanese version. Ignore the American versions that are out on YouTube right now. I know it's appealing to just watch a movie for free, but like you could find the original Japanese version if you look hard enough. Personally, I recommend just getting that Arrow video box set. It's incredible. Highly recommend it. 5 stars. Go check it out. And with all of that out of the way, I'm Cole McCormick. You are watching Firewood Media. This is part 1 of my massive Gamera retrospective project. Stay tuned because up next I'll be covering Gamera vs. Barugon. Big thanks to our channel members for making videos like these possible. Their names are listed right here. Either way, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.